Hi everyone, super warm welcome to the Continuous Testing Meetup. Today we're having a really interesting talk, super exciting because I can also reflect on that topic. So we're having Benjamin having an interesting talk, and we are gonna go slowly through it. We have some time to cover different topics, but before that, I'm just getting someone live transcripting. Okay, let's enable live transcripting to see what happens. I've never used this feature in Zoom, but somebody's requesting it, so let's see how it works. So we're learning as we do. Yeah, so very nice to have you all here. I hope you're having a nice day, afternoon, evening in the middle of all this. Hopefully the pandemic will ease out a bit in the upcoming months, and maybe we will have an in-person meetup in Berlin or in one of the other cities where we have a group. But we'll take things cautiously, and we're not going to promise anything because you never know how these things are. Cool. So before jumping into the main topic, we always welcome and we always thank our sponsors, Sauce Labs and Trendic, because thanks to them we have the infrastructure to have like this Zoom call, like a good account where we can have live transcription enabled and all this. We're always looking forward to people who want to collaborate with us. So these two companies are sponsoring us, but there are a group of people who are volunteers in the meetup. For example, we have today Aurélien, who is a person who constantly looks for new speakers and talks to them and convinces them to speak here. And Benjamin is the result of that. We also have Severin and Oksana, who are not here today. They're not feeling well, but we just send them a big hi to them, and looking forward to having in the next talk. So it's a nice place here where we have a combination of some companies sponsoring us and also people from the community who volunteer to help and basically bring good content for the community. So yeah, that was the talk we had 2 months ago from Andre Knight, the Automation Panda. So it's there, it's online. And the one we had 1 month ago from Nikolai at Volokin, so we haven't had the time to produce and edit the recording. We'll do that in the next 2 or 3 days, and we will upload it. And that's why the recommendation is to follow what Aurélien is posting in the chat, to go to the continuoustestingmeetup.com website, where you will see like all the details of the event, and you will also see the video when it gets posted. And we also write into the meetup.com groups to let you know that something was posted. So keep an eye, and we'll post the video from the last meetup in the next few days. Right, so jumping to the main topic, we're gonna have today Benjamin Bischoff. I'm not gonna make a big introduction because he has been around in Twitter these days. He has been doing some webinars, some interesting things. And I'm very happy to have him here because basically it's nice to have people who have the experience from the day-to-day work and how and they're going to bring us ways to learn from that experience. And the talk from today is very interesting for me, as I was mentioning a moment ago, because I went through that path very similarly. I was a developer full-time. I went to testing, and nowadays I have a more balanced role where I have to test some days and I have to develop other days, and that's why I'm very much looking forward to this talk. Right, I'm not gonna delay things much more, so I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen, and I'm gonna welcome Benjamin to the stage. And thank you, Benjamin, for being here, and the stage is yours.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. I'm really thrilled to be here. And like you said, this talk is a talk that you could have as well, because I think everyone has a story how they got into testing or how they got into development. So this is just mine. I wanted to share. And by the way, this is called the Road to QA, an okay-ish success story, because I did a talk like that before in 2017 at a Selenium conference, Berlin. And somebody gave me the feedback, I think 3 of 5 stars or even 2, and wrote as a feedback that was an okay-ish success story. And I really liked this, so I kept this in the title. So about me, I'm Benjamin Bischoff. I am a test automation engineer at Trivago in Düsseldorf, Germany. This is where our headquarters is. I have about 20 years of development experience, and of those 20 years, about 7 of software development in test experience. And I can be found on Twitter. Bischoff Dev is my handle, and I also have a blog where I occasionally post articles, softwaretester.blog, if you want to check it out. So a little disclaimer first, because every presentation needs to have a disclaimer. I learned this is not about bragging at all. If it sounds about bragging anywhere, it's unintentional. I just want to share my personal story, and also all the views I express here are my own. And like I said, this is a story that every one of you could probably present. So I'm very humble about it. For me, it all comes down to one question: do I want to keep doing what I do? And I think pretty much everyone in IT has asked him or herself this question before, especially today in the great resignation and the great exodus where people change jobs constantly. And I see that also here at this company, that many people go and many people come. So that is happening right now. But for me, this main question came after about 15 years of developing software. But to know a little bit about my journey, we have to go way back, not to my birth, but to my school time. Because for me, it all started with the Commodore C64, which is a very popular computer that had been around, I think, when did I go to school? I think 85 or so. And this was not only for playing games. By the way, this was not my Commodore C64. That was my best friend's C64. And he also had over 100 games of questionable origin. But that was not mainly what it was about. The main thing that fascinated us was that there were computer magazines that printed code, like physical magazines, that you could type, just copy the code, type it into the basic interpreter of the C64, and you would see a bouncing ball or something along those lines. So that was my first introduction to programming. And I was more than excited when my dad bought our first PC, which was an Intel 8286 with a whopping 20 megabytes of hard drive. And as a side note, I immediately took over 12 megabytes of that space for my programming exercises. And it was also a monochrome machine, so no color display and all. Yeah, just, I loved it. And from there, I continued with a basic journey, later with QBasic for DOS, and then with Visual Basic for DOS. I don't know if many of you remember this. That was a basic dialect that allowed you to create user forms, but all in ASCII, like here. Bill remembers, I see that. That was the most fascinating thing for me, to create software that had an actual use and that you could give to people on a disk and they could use it. And then in 1995, 96, I went to the US for a student exchange. And this photo shows me on the right side with my host brother, Josh, who shared the same passion for programming as I did. So we did a lot of that together, both in BASIC and in Turbo Pascal later. And the other picture is my programming teacher from the high school I went to, and she had a major impact in keeping my love for programming alive. Also, when I returned, I did some side projects because I heard that PHP was supposed to be the cool thing, the cool new tool. So I played around with that and also tried Flash that also just came out. I tried that with a friend who was an illustrator. So I did very, very simple ActionScript tries, and he did graphics. So that was my first contact with both game programming and teamwork. And both of those aspects played a major role for me later. And then I just knew along the way that this was the way to go. That was the career I wanted to have. So in Germany, there is something that's called vocational training that is part school and part work at a company. And you can do that in place of going to university and study. I never studied at a university, so I'm living proof that you don't have to if you want to get into tech. So don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It's all possible. Yeah, the company I worked for on my way to what's translated as IT specialist for application development, which sounds way fancier than it actually is. That was a company that wanted to offer web development to their customers, but they didn't know how. They never did that. They were more working with crystal reports, so creating business reports from databases. And since I had a little bit of experience with PHP, that's what I had to do there, web development. And that was also the first contact with real customers for me. Unfortunately, in 2001, the company went bankrupt. So I was still able to finish my vocational training there, but that was quite a shock. Like when you first get into the business world and the first thing you experience is a bankruptcy, that's not very nice. And then I realized for myself, when I show something like this, it always says no to self, because that is not an advice I want to give in general, but it fit for me. Don't rely only on formal education. Because of my side projects I did before, I was able to get my first real job through my Flash and PHP and web development experience through this exact friend with the C64. That's where the circle is closing again. So that was a web agency in Cologne, Germany, and they specialized on web and Flash development. So I was right at home there. And because we did projects for different customers and in smaller teams, the teamwork aspect was very prominent there. Also internal organization, both of the source code and of documentation, because other people could take over projects and you had to hand over your projects properly. Yeah, and then in 2003, there it was again, another bankruptcy. And at that point, I began to question if I was the reason why companies went bankrupt. but hopefully not. And this is where this question, do I want to keep doing what I do, came to me first, because I didn't want to be in an area, in a field that just didn't work, apparently, because companies were just going away. So I decided, because I was young and careless, to try being a freelancer from 2003 on. And that worked rather well. I did that for about 6.5 years, and I could earn enough money to make a living, not a great living, but I could survive on my own. And I worked as a self-employed web and Flash developer. And because of my former web agency days, I also had some contacts left to some other companies, so I could knock on their door and try to sell websites or Flash projects and ad games that were hip at the time. Yeah, and that this newspaper clipping is the only one that was there. A reporter from our local newspaper came to me and interviewed me about my freelance plans, and I literally begged for customers in this article, and it worked. There were some that actually called me. Yeah, and through this freelance work, I learned way more organization, way more about taxes and the business aspect that was usually covered by a company. But at that time, I didn't have that. And also a lot about making code reusable, because if you juggle different customers at the same time, wanting kind of similar things, you want to be able to reuse what you have, to not spend too much time reinventing everything. Yeah, that was a project. It's another circle closing. That was one of the bigger projects I did together with a friend I tried Flash with. It's translated Sumo X, and it was an online game where two people could fight against each other. Yeah, and that was a Flash project, and I'm still pretty proud of this, because it was a project that we actually sold, and it made us money, and people played it, and that felt really good. And because of that work, because of making games more and more, also as a freelancer, I decided to take on an offer that a large game company gave me. You can probably guess who that is. I try to avoid names here. Who knows who will watch this? Yeah, and I was hired as kind of a consultant for ActionScript because of my Flash experience. And later, I was hired as a front-end lead for a social game project. And because of that, I had to give up my freelance status and be a permanent employee, because otherwise I couldn't have taken on this role as a front-end lead. So finally, I was making a real game for a real game company. Working in a larger team was a big aspect of it. We started with 3 people, I think, and the team grew up to 15. So a lot of communication was going on. I learned a ton about coordinating front-end and back-end work, because before that I had done basically both, but now I was specifically hired to do the front-end work. So talking to the back-end people and swapping APIs, that was a really valuable lesson. And yeah, QA as necessary evil, that was the first time I got in touch with QA, because we had one dedicated QA person in this team who played the game over and over and over all day. And because the rest of us were basically developers, yeah, I have to say it like it was. It's not like this anymore, of course, but we kind of looked down on this role and considered it a necessary evil. We even had situations where we pushed bugs into production that we knew about, but we said if QA doesn't find those, we don't have a bug. And yeah, I'm not proud of this. Yeah, that was the game. It was kind of a Farmville mixed with the Settlers, but yeah, some people played it, but it was not that successful. So in 2012, of course, it was game over, and they pulled the plug after 2 years. By the way, the project that started in the office next to us, in the room, literal room next to us, it's still around today. Another online project that is still successful, generating money for the company, but our little project didn't make it. That was really sad. But I stayed at the company because they formed a tools and services team. And at that point, I didn't know any Java at all. And I highly doubted that I could do that, but they said, yeah, please try it. So I did. And through that, being thrown into the cold water, I actually picked up Java, which was very surprising. We had to write tons of documentation, and this was also the first project where we worked with multiple teams across the world, because we were doing tools and services for the what's called live operations phase of games. So after an online game is launched, it has to be kept alive, sometimes for 10 years or longer. So during that time, there is a lot of need to for customer support, to interact with players, to reimburse in-game items that the players never received, to launch marketing campaigns, to have in-game events. And we did the services and the tools for that. And we also had a dedicated QA team in Bucharest, Romania. And that was quite a different experience, because they were really professional. And at that time, I started realizing how important that is, because those tools and services could have destroyed in-game economies and could have seriously ruined this project. And also, because it was such a serious development and serious project, we introduced unit integration and functional testing, which I had no clue about before. But I found this really, really fascinating, to be able to write code that tests other code. And yeah, my true love, Selenium WebDriver. Thank you, Diego. That is when it all started, when I played with Selenium and could test the user interface and do end-to-end tests of our tools. That's where it all started. But that's also where something ended, because I had serious doubts at that point of my further career, because I really enjoyed testing, automated testing specifically, but there was no career path at the company. And also there was, in general, not that much interest for testing, automated testing, in the gaming industry, I felt. So that's when the question really came up again. Do I want to keep doing what I do? And then I found a job offer from Trivago, my current company, for a test automation engineer, which really made me think hard about my career decision. The problem here was that I completely lacked experience to do this because all I did before was kind of self-taught in this area. But before that, I did a small detour at another web agency because they paid a little more than the test automation engineer role that I wanted to apply for. And that was a big, big mistake. I was working with SAP software, which I personally never want to do again. And the team I was working in was juggling 3 clients at the same time. And also we were trying to work in an agile way internally, but bill the clients as if we were doing waterfall. So it was a real mess. And a little side note, we also had to do time tracking of our work, but not the work we were really doing, but the work, or we were supposed to bill the time that a more experienced developer would have spent on the task, so that the clients were under the impression that only seniors were working for them. And just no. So I said to myself, I'm hitting an obstacle here. And usually I say, if I can think I can eventually make it, I will keep trying. But if I'm sure I can't, that's the better way, quitting. And yes, and that's something I tell everyone who is in doubt. That's not an advice only for me, that's an advice for everybody. If you deep in your heart know you can't make it, you won't make it, better quit. Of course, you need to have an alternative. Just I wouldn't advise quitting and then trying to find something new. But if there are alternatives, leave. And also I said to myself, I never want to work for external customers again. And I kept this promise to this day. Yeah, and then there was the decision phase again about the test automation engineer role. That was still there, this job offer. And that looked super green, this grass on the other side. But then I made the mistake of checking out websites and online opinions about this change of going from a developer to QA. And I found very different things like this. I'm a software developer that happens to write an application that tests another application, and am more than just that QA guy. So that was kind of strange, that the subtext of this. This was a little clearer. It said, sadly, QA becomes a dumping ground for bad engineers. Having to interview QA staff, I run into way more idiots than my development counterparts. That was also not very encouraging. And this one, sorry, but switching to QA from dev is career suicide. You can tell yourself whatever lie you want and convince yourself that it's the right choice, but you'll eventually realize that it's a bad decision. And that had an impact on me, but still not that much of an impact that I didn't say don't listen to the internet. Because I really wanted that career change. I really wanted to pursue testing. And so finally I became a test automation engineer, which was really scary. And yeah, my job was actually called, when I joined, web test automation engineer, which is kind of strange, but that's essentially what I did when I joined. And there was a newly formed release and test automation team that I joined that was just formed a few weeks before, with the goal of centralizing all the test automation stuff that happened in the company. And our main goals were development and maintenance of our end-to-end test automation framework and all the related test pipelines, and just centralizing everything, and also being a point of contact for all test automation matters. That didn't sound that bad at first. And at that point, I also thought about why I personally think that it's a good choice to go from dev more into the QA direction. But keep in mind that this is all that I learned after being there in this role for 1 or 2 years. So that was also about to change a little bit. Knowledge sharing played a very important part. Change of perspective, just seeing the applications and the code from another angle through the eyes of QA was really refreshing. Getting to know the application on a test, that was a big one, knowing who does what, because I realized that the QA team always knew the right people to contact for everything. They were the only entity that had this power to just know who does what. And also teaching and learning from each other. Also appreciation. I realized that QA is a very necessary part of the software development lifecycle, and that QA develops the product as well actively. And I said to myself, then do not underestimate QA ever again, because that changed my view, like turned it around completely. Also, the communication aspect that was not there so much before, it had picked up a lot, because we as a test automation team had to deliver needed features for QA, for testing, also get a sense of the pain points in testing and test reporting, in running the tests and monitoring and all that. Develop the processes together was a big part of it, also the test strategy, and in general enable easier exploration, because automation should never or will never take away exploratory testing, but it's there to help with exploratory testing. Yeah, bridging the gap, that was what I thought, being an active link between developers and QA. So at that time, I really made this hard distinction between development and QA. And I thought the test automation team was the right entity to work with the developers to improve the testability of the software under test. And to the other side, I wanted to introduce software craftsmanship principles to QA for test development, also clean code principles. And yeah, that kind of thinking, also this team being there, led to something that I like to call the triangle of doom. Because before that, we had the two entities, quality assurance team and development team, and they had a pretty good relationship already. In fact, the QA team was doing the releases that I haven't seen before in another company. Usually the product team would do releases, but at trivago, the QA team does the releases because they know exactly when something is ready for release. Yeah, and then the test automation team came as a third entity, and we had bias towards QA, we had bias towards development team, and both those entities had bias against us. So it was not working better. It was actually working much worse because we were like sitting on the side and trying to be a part of it, but it didn't quite work. Also, we just didn't communicate why we are there and what the goal is of the test automation project. And at that point, it almost failed, the whole test automation project, because nobody really had a clear picture of why we were doing that. And the goal of it all was that test automation became part of the QA team. So the relationship between development and QA was still intact, but we had a completely different understanding now of being part of QA. Let me go back again. Sorry for that. Because at that point, we communicated differently. We learned way more from each other. I learned a lot about exploratory testing techniques, and the other people learned something about writing tests and automating. And it was just way, way better to keep it like this than having a separate team. And yeah, improving dev skills, that's actually a thing in this role, in the test automation engineer role, because many devs fear that they don't get to code at all. But it's not true, because you develop test frameworks and pipelines and add features and think about things like parallel test runs and resilience and connecting to test clouds, working with and around the software and the test requirements, and also improving testability. Doing documentation, it is a part of coding, it's a part of development. So that's what you really learn in this role. Also, what I started doing is open source development. Actually, my company encourages that, to put out software as open source. And through that, I learned a ton of code craftsmanship and clean code and writing unit tests, because you don't want to have a software out in the open that is not properly tested, because other people will use it and it will all come back to you in form of bug reports. Yeah, documentation again, which is still one of the most important things for me. And forcing yourself to stick to guidelines. And that's a project that came out of this open source development that I did. It's called Cucumber. It's still around today. It's a Cucumber BPD reporting Maven plugin. Yeah, and this originated from a company hackathon, because sometimes we have hackathons where we can just try out things, and this was rather successful. So we decided to turn this into an open source project, which is still maintained today. And yeah, that's really important. Tests are code, and tests have to be maintained and be part of the code base. And you have to fix bugs in the tests and test the tests. You have to refactor test code. You have to be part of code reviews of the test code. So it's like a real product. And I would actually say that working in QA has improved my coding skills a lot, more than working as a developer or a 100% developer would ever have. And also a big learning I had was QA is not the only entity for quality, because everyone is responsible for quality. And that's why all those discussions are here at the moment about the name QA. Is quality assurance really a good name for that team? I heard one of my bosses say, yeah, QA could actually stand for questions and answers, because that's what QA is doing, asking questions, getting answers. And I quite like that. Also, quality ambassadors is better than quality assurance, in my opinion, but still, I don't think there's the perfect name yet. I think for me, the perfect name is testers. That's what I consider myself as well. Yeah, and that's where my CV started looking a little funny, because I actually decided to go back to the same company I I was before joining trivago as an automation engineer, because I saw this job ad in the company I worked before, and I thought that's it. That's what I always wanted to do in the gaming industry, and promote those test automation things I learned, but that heavily backfired. I was an automation engineer there for 5 months, and I realized that the gaming industry is not for me anymore. Being there as a single person trying to push test automation in a highly busy game team is almost impossible. At least it was for me. So that was when I hit the obstacle again and said to myself, I don't think I will be able to make it, so I quit. And I also thought about job stickiness and retention. What makes you stick at a job? You have to have the feeling of creating value and being valued. And I didn't have that. I had the feeling that I didn't create value there because nobody wanted that stuff that I was doing. Also, the company culture is an important part, and also the learning opportunities. And I was super glad that I maintained my connections when I left my current and yeah, actually all my companies. It's important that you don't leave and be mad at each other, but you leave and communicate clearly why you leave and what your plans are, and just keep the connections alive, because then I was able, luckily enough, to come back to trivago again as a test automation engineer, but this time more in the backend. So a completely new adventure for me that I'm in now since last year in November. Still embedded into core QA, and yeah, I'm working a lot with cloud platforms at the moment, trying to learn about that and trying to write test frameworks for this, and also develop more and more test strategies. And if we have some 1 or 2 minutes left, I would like to talk about my key learnings that I had. Test automation is not the end. It's the beginning of exploration. It's help to exploration. It's not there to take any jobs. It's just a tool for effective exploration. That's what I think. Yeah, it's a tool. It's nothing more. It's a valuable tool. You can also fail with that. It can also be way more expensive than you think, but you really have to try hard and give yourself enough time to make this work. Test automation is a product. Like I said, tests are code, and test automation has to be taken care of to be trusted and to be used properly within the software development lifecycle. Never be afraid to question things, both career-wise and also product-wise, with other teams, with product managers, with people you work with. If you think something can be done differently, just say it. Always listen to your users, no matter if they're in the company or external customers. Luckily for me, they're all internal, so I don't have to work with external customers again. And that's an important one. Never stop learning. I don't think there was ever a day that I didn't learn something new, and I'm definitely eager to learn way more. And that's the most important thing. I mean, I started developing software because I didn't want to communicate. I wanted to sit in a basement and code, but that has changed and the whole industry has changed. Communication is still the key, and that will never change. And with that, thank you for listening to my my story. I hope it wasn't too boring and maybe you got 1 or 2 points out of that. And thanks again for having me today.
Thank you, Benjamin. That was quite nice. I think I was very interested in the way you transmitted the message in a simple way. Like I didn't find any bragging, just to.
That's good. I wasn't sure about this, especially when I had those slides with some key projects. I absolutely didn't want to come across as, yeah, look at what cool stuff I did. That's not what this is about.
No, not at all. But yeah, thank you for the presentation. And I just was wondering if anyone who is in the audience has a question, or while you think about the question, maybe I can start with a question myself, since I went through a similar path. I was wondering what you found. So did you find something that was difficult when moving to QA, like something in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what was super difficult was at first because I went to the customers. Our customers were basically all exploratory testers with almost no coding experience. It was really, really nerve-wracking to teach and to learn without coming across as talking down to people. Because from my role, and I'm really guilty of that, I thought, yeah, I know how to develop software. So yeah, let me share my wisdom with you. But at first I completely ignored that the QA team had knowledge in other areas that I had no idea of. So that's what I learned the hard way, also through feedback sessions, that some people thought I came across as yeah, ignorant. So yeah, learning how to teach was really, really a big one for me, I would say.
Yeah, I find that interesting because being a developer for some years, then you obviously have the luck to know how to code. But then when you move to testing or to QA, you have the skills to code, right? And what I found, it's that I don't know how to test. And I think sometimes this is something that people undervalue a lot. And I had to spend, I don't know, like 1 or 2 years understanding what testing was and how to test, because when I was given an API or something, I mean, I understood that I had to send payloads and assert results, but then basically what was happening there is that I didn't really know how to approach like I didn't know how to approach like what to test, like what to attack first, what was more important, how to prioritize things in testing. And many people think that everything is coding in automation testing, but if you don't know how actually to approach a problem and to understand what you have to test, then coding is the least important thing. So for me, that was the hardest thing when I was doing testing full time.
Yeah, you have to learn when to know that automation is maybe not a good thing, and that exploration is way better at that point. And also all automation starts with exploration. And also when you automate things by code, you have to explore the problem first.
Yeah, absolutely. So while someone else has a a question, one other thing I wanted to ask you was like I found something that I really liked when I moved to QA. I found something. So what was the thing you liked when you moved from development to do testing?
I think I really like to see QA work and to see how versatile the work actually is. I always imagined QA as being very boring and just following test protocols all day. But when shadowing some people and seeing what issues they actually find and how complex this work really is, it was really fascinating and really eye-opening to see that QA and especially exploratory testing is really, really hard.
Yeah, I agree on that. For me, what I like the most is that maybe, I mean, if you were a developer full time and it was normal that you had to be on call, so that you have to be available when the system goes down. Normally, when you move to testing, you don't have to be on call. So that was the thing I loved the most when I moved to testing. And the other thing I found super interesting and I really liked with testing, like after a couple of years of doing testing, I actually got offers to be promoted as a manager, because when you said that people in testing know most of the things that are happening around the team, they know who to contact, they know what to do, they know how to manage situations that might be tricky. So I think testing has like builds a lot of skills on you that actually can make you grow in your career if you want to go into management or into like bigger roles. I didn't want to because I don't feel like I would be good at it, but really the profile you get in testing is not comparable to the profile you get in development, because you get a bigger scope and a better understanding of things. I don't know if
Yeah,
you had the same experience.
absolutely, yes. And I also don't understand really developers devaluing QA anymore, and also from the other side, QA seeing the development role as a step up career-wise. That is also not true, because you can be a master in any of those disciplines, and that's great, and that's all needed, and there is no one that is better than the other one role wise. At least that's what I think now.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I don't know if any of you folks has a question. I can still throw one or two, but I'd be happy if someone else wants to jump and share a comment or a question. Could be your own experience, maybe. If you moved from one role to a different one, we still have a few minutes if you want to chat a bit. So while that, I can throw my last question, which was more related to something you commented a moment ago, and it's like when you're used to do development the whole time, to code, did you find some sort of formula or concept or baseline to decide, okay, this doesn't make sense to be automated? Like, what's your general guideline on that?
Wow. um, I usually now listen to QA because they know best what should be automated and what can be automated, because they know exactly what maybe what is a very tricky bug that just occurred that will be tricky to find in the future. So we write a test case for it. But there is no general guideline, I would say. I mean, it's all I mean, the critical path of the application under test has to be covered at all costs. Also, the paths that make money for the company have to be covered. Everything else is up to the testers, and also based on user feedback and things like that. So that's where everything comes together again at the testers.
Right. Yeah. I was only curious because I always remember the situation I had in actually my first job in Germany was automation testing, and then in Colombia back I was like full-time developer. So there was this corner case where a customer ordered a product to be delivered in Germany, but the PayPal account was from sorry, the purchase was done in the German website with a PayPal account from the UK, but it was supposed to be delivered in Australia, and then it was failing for some reason, and and we all thought like, should we write a test for this? And then we checked the numbers, how many people actually do those type of orders, and then we decided how long would it take to do this manually, and how long would it take to be actually write the test with environments and all this and that, and normally we came with an idea of like, if the effort to automate this is I think 3 or 4 times than actually what you need to do it manually, then we just avoid, and we just write it down clearly what you have to test manually and or to explore depending on the situation. But yeah, that was kind of what we came up with a group of people there.
Yeah, it's always important to keep the balance and not automate everything. I know there are people out there who want to automate 100% of everything, but this is not possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's
not a good idea.
That's a strong message, that you don't need to automate everything. Right. Okay. Well, I think we're coming close to the end of the meetup, because I just don't want to keep people just waiting and listening to my voice. At least maybe your voice is more interesting. But yeah, like I think maybe we could start wrapping up. So cool. I just want to thank everyone who was here joining us, especially also to Benjamin for taking the time in the evening, in the German evening, to join us. And yeah, thank you for being here. And let me move forward. Yeah, as I was mentioning earlier today at the beginning of the event, please go to this website, continuoustestingmeetup.com. There you will find the recording of this meetup and the one from the previous one, and all the upcoming events. Ideally, we will have our next event around the same time in March, so 24th of March. So hopefully you will join. And the last thing I just want to say, join tomorrow's meetup that we will have with Rudolf. I'm forgetting names so fast. With Rudolf, I will be talking about Selenium 4. So join us over there. And yeah, to wrap everything up, really thank you all for being here, and thank you, Benjamin, for being here and taking the time. Hopefully we can have you again later this year, or maybe in an in-person meetup, who knows, if things go a bit better. But yeah, I really appreciate you had the time to be here. And thank you again. And thank you to everyone for being here.